I remember the exact moment I realized my designs had been stolen. There it was, plastered across the main display at the Milan Fashion Week. Me intricate pattern of intertwined roses and thorns. The same one my stepbrother Marcus had called too provocative and unmarketable just 3 months earlier, except now it wasn't mine anymore. It had been rebranded under Novak Couture, my father's company, with Marcus's name attached to it as the brilliant new design director. The irony tasted bitter in my mouth. I stood frozen in the back of the crowded event hall, champagne flute clutched so tightly in my hand I was surprised it didn't shatter. People around me applauded, critics nodded approvingly, and fashion bloggers frantically typed notes about the revolutionary new aesthetic direction of the brand, my design, my vision, all of it stolen by the person who was supposed to be family. I suppose I should start at the beginning. I'm Alexandra Novak. Alex to most people, and fashion design runs in my blood. My father, Victor Novak, built Novak Couture from nothing, transforming it from a small tailoring shop in Brooklyn to one of the most prestigious fashion houses in America. I grew up surrounded by fabrics, sketches, and the rhythmic hum of sewing machines. While other kids played with dolls, I was designing wardrobes for them. When I turned 18, it seemed natural that I would join the family business. I had the education, the passion, and the talent, or so I thought. What I didn't have was my father's favor. That belonged exclusively to Marcus, my stepbrother from my father's second marriage. 10 years older than me, with a business degree and absolutely no creative background whatsoever, Marcus had somehow positioned himself as the heir apparent to the Novak empire. "You're too emotional about your designs, Alex," my father would say. "Fashion is a business, not just art. Marcus understands the financial side." For years, I swallowed my pride and worked under Marcus's supervision, watching as he claimed credit for successful campaigns I'd contributed to, dismissed my most innovative ideas, and gradually pushed me further into the background. I became the invisible designer, the nameless creative force behind Novak Couture's commercial success. But I persisted. I worked harder, stayed later, fought for every inch of creative ground. My small team, Zoe from marketing, Raj from textiles, and Evelyn, my assistant, they knew the truth. They saw how Marcus would sweep in at the last moment, review our nearly finished work, make an insignificant change, and then present it to my father as his own inspiration. "This is how the industry works, Alex," Zoe would say, trying to comfort me. "Your time will come." I almost believed her until the day everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning, unusually warm for October in New York. I'd spent the entire weekend finalizing my designs for the Spring Collectiona series I called Beautiful Chaos, featuring complex patterns inspired by the unexpected beauty in nature's most chaotic moments. The centerpiece was my rose and thorn design, a motif I'd been perfecting for months, with each thorn intricately placed to create a secondary pattern visible only when the fabric moved with the body. When I presented it at the weekly design meeting, Marcus barely looked at the portfolio. "It's too complex," he said, flipping through my sketches without really seeing them. "Too avant-garde for our market. We need something safer, more commercial." My father nodded in agreement. "Listen to your brother, Alex. He knows what sells." I argued my case, pointing out how the collection balanced commercial appeal with artistic innovation, how it could position Novak as a forward-thinking brand. I'd even included market research and preliminary costing speaking their language, playing their game. It didn't matter. My collection was rejected. As everyone filed out of the conference room, Marcus patted my shoulder condescendingly and said, "Maybe next season, little sister. In the meantime, I need you to help with the resort wear line." That night, I left my designs in my office drawer instead of taking them home, a mistake I would regret for months to come. The next morning, my keycard didn't work. I stood outside the glass doors of Novak Couture headquarters, swiping repeatedly as the security guard watched with uncomfortable pity. "Sorry, Miss Novak," he said finally. "I got a notice this morning. Your access has been revoked." I called Evelyn immediately. She came down to meet me, her face pale and troubled. "Marcus cleaned out your office last night," she whispered, glancing back at the elevators nervously. "Your position has been eliminated. Budget cuts, they're saying." My head spun. Budget cuts? We just had our most profitable quarter ever. Evelyn couldn't meet my eyes. There's more. Marcus announced a new direction for the spring collection this morning. He's calling it Natural Revolution. My heart sank. My collection? He's using my collection? Not exactly, she hesitated. He's modified it, simplified it. But Alex, the rose pattern is definitely yours. I demanded to see my father. Evelyn managed to sneak me upstairs to his office where I found him reviewing quarterly reports. What is this about eliminating my position? I demanded, my voice shaking with anger. My father looked up, his expression surprisingly cold. Marcus made a compelling case for restructuring the design department. We need to streamline operations. And what about my designs? The ones Marcus rejected yesterday and is suddenly promoting today. He frowned slightly. Alex, these accusations aren't healthy. Marcus presented his concept boards weeks ago. If there are similarities to your work, perhaps it speaks to your shared aesthetics. Shared aesthetics? I nearly choked on the words. He took my portfolio, my exact designs. Enough. My father slammed his hand on the desk. This is exactly why Marcus is better suited for leadership. You're too emotional, too quick to see personal slights where there are only business decisions. He slid a manila envelope across the desk. Your severance package, 3 months' salary, a generous arrangement considering. I stared at him. This man I'd idolized my entire life, suddenly a stranger to me. You're firing me? Your own daughter? I'm making a business decision, he replied evenly. I suggest you take some time to think about your future, preferably outside of fashion. This industry clearly brings out your worst qualities. I left the building in a daze, the envelope untouched on his desk. For weeks afterward, I barely left my apartment. Zoe and Raj tried to reach out, but their messages grew less frequent, as it became clear associating with me might jeopardize their own positions. Only Evelyn remained loyal, occasionally sending cryptic updates about the Natural Revolution collection's progress. Depression slowly gave way to anger, and anger eventually crystallized into determination. If Marcus wanted to steal my work, I would create something even better. I took freelance design jobs to pay the rent and spent every spare moment building my own collection. I called it reclamation designs that told the story of taking back what was stolen, of finding strength in betrayal. Then came that fateful day at Milan Fashion Week. I hadn't planned to attend, but Evelyn called the night before. You need to see this for yourself, she said. They're unveiling the spring collection tomorrow. I caught the first flight to Milan, using nearly all my savings. I needed to witness firsthand what they had done with my work. What I saw was worse than I'd imagined. Not only had Marcus used my rose and thorn pattern, but he'd also incorporated several other elements from my rejected collection. Elements that were unmistakably mine: the asymmetrical necklines, the structured shoulders with flowing sleeves, even the color palette I'd specifically created to symbolize dawn breaking after darkness. As Marcus took his triumphant bow on the runway, something inside me hardened. I would no longer be the invisible designer, the discarded daughter. I pulled out my phone and took photographs of every piece, every detail that had been stolen from my original work. The next morning, I was seated across from Lucia Romano, fashion editor at Moda Verita, one of the most influential industry publications in Europe. Why should I believe you? She asked, examining the photographs and sketches I'd brought. Family disputes in fashion houses are common. What makes yours different? I placed my design journal on the table between us. Dated entries, detailed sketches, material swatches, and this, I pulled out a thumb drive. Time-stamped digital backups of every design, every iteration, every note I made during the development process, including emails from Marcus rejecting these very designs as unmarketable. Lucia raised an eyebrow, suddenly interested. That would be compelling evidence. There's more, I continued. 3 former Novak employees willing to go on record about Marcus's pattern of appropriating others' work. And signature fabric techniques that I developed personally, techniques that nobody at Novak Couture knows how to execute properly without my notes, which explains why the finished garments don't move correctly on the runway. Lucia leaned forward. If what you're saying is true, this isn't just family drama. It's intellectual property theft. Exactly, I replied. I'm not asking you to take sides in a family dispute. I'm showing you evidence of design plagiarism at one of fashion's most respected houses. The story broke 3 days later. Design Dynasty Disaster. Novak here accused of stealing sister's work, screamed the headlines. The fashion world, always hungry for scandal, devoured every detail. More industry insiders came forward, revealing similar incidents involving Marcus over the years. My phone rang constantly. Journalists, lawyers, former colleagues. I ignored most calls but answered one from a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Alexandra Novak?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes," I replied cautiously. "This is Diana Reeves from Atelier Collective. We've been following your situation with interest. I'd like to discuss a potential opportunity, if you're willing to meet." Atelier Collective was a rising star in sustainable luxury fashion, known for giving designers creative control and proper credit. I agreed to the meeting, trying to temper my hopes. Meanwhile, Novak Couture was in damage control mode. My father issued a statement describing the situation as a misunderstanding between siblings and promising an internal review. Marcus disappeared from public view. Buyers began canceling orders for the controversial collection, unwilling to associate with potential design theft. 3 weeks after the scandal broke, I received a text from an unexpected source, me stepmother Claudia. "Your father wants to meet. No lawyers, no Marcus, just family." I agreed, setting the meeting at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop in Brooklyn, not far from where Novak Couture had begun 4 decades earlier. My father looked older than I remembered, the scandal having etched new lines around his eyes. He ordered coffee, but didn't touch it. "I didn't know," he said finally, his voice lacking its usual authority. "I should have, but I didn't know Marcus was taking your work." I stayed silent, waiting. "The board is pushing for his resignation," he continued. "The spring collection has been pulled. We're facing lawsuits from retailers, cancellations from suppliers." "I'm sorry about the business," I said, surprising myself by actually meaning it. "But I'm not sorry the truth came out." He nodded slowly. "I've been reviewing your original proposals, not just for this collection, but from the past few years." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "You were right. I was wrong. Your vision for the brand was always clearer than mine or Marcus's." "It's too late for that now," I replied, thinking of my meeting with Atelier Collective, which had gone better than I could have hoped. "Maybe," he conceded, "but I'd like to make it right. Come back to Novak, not as an employee, but as creative director. Full autonomy, proper credit, board seat. The company should have been yours all along." I studied my father's face, searching for the manipulative businessman I'd come to expect. Instead, I saw something unfamiliar: regret. "I can't," I said finally. "I've accepted a position with Atelier Collective. I'm launching my own line under their umbrella. Full creative control, with my name on the label." Disappointment flickered across his face. "I understand." As we prepared to leave, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small leather-bound book. I recognized it immediately, my grandfather's original sketch journal from when he'd taught my father tailoring. "This belongs with the true designer in the family," he said, placing it in my hands. "Your grandfather would have been proud." 6 months later, my reclamation collection debuted to critical acclaim. The signature piece, a gown featuring a phoenix rising from shattered glass, became the most photographed garment of the season. As I took my bow on the runway, I spotted my father in the audience, applauding alongside everyone else. Novak Couture survived the scandal, though significantly diminished. Marcus resigned, eventually starting a small business consultancy far from the fashion world. My father brought in an established designer to rebuild the brand's reputation, publicly crediting me as the inspiration for the company's new direction in transparency and designer recognition. We never became close again, my father and I, but we found a kind of peace. Occasionally, we meet for coffee and talk about design, just design, not business. Sometimes, it almost feels like family. As for me, I no longer fear being invisible. My work speaks for itself, and now, finally, it speaks under my name. The journey from dismissed daughter to respected designer wasn't what I'd planned, but it taught me something essential. Your vision is worth fighting for. Your voice worth hearing. And sometimes the greatest revenge is simply succeeding on your own terms. The fashion industry still whispers about the Novak family drama, but I've stopped listening to whispers. I'm too busy creating the next collection, training young designers who remind me of myself, and making sure they understand one crucial truth: talent deserves recognition, creativity demands respect, and no one has the right to steal your vision. Not even family. Especially not family.